What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're finally back home from Gatlinburg and it's time to get back to work on the cars. Previously, you know, we were working on my dad's BMW. He had a catastrophic engine failure, so we ended up having to yank that guy out, get the new engine completely refreshed. That was a junkyard engine, so we did all new seals and made sure that, you know, everything is as good as it can be. So now it's time to get that engine in this car and fingers crossed have a first start by the end of the weekend. So having a look under the hood of this thing, you can see we have the transmission held up on a jack stand. The whole front of the car is on jack stands and all it's waiting for is its new engine, which we have sitting in the corner over there behind that engine crane. The skies are looking a little gloomy today, so let's get the hatch backed out, see how much work we can get done before it wants to downpour, and hopefully it won't be too bad to get this engine back in by myself. I'm hoping that I can use some straps to hold the transmission and kind of wiggle it as I need, and we should be able to get that thing jammed right down in there. I'd be lying to your face if I said that was easy, but it did take about the better half of the day to get that engine in place. We have all the bell housing bolts on, we got the motor mounts in, we got the exhaust on, we got the drive shaft in down below. Everything except for the torque converter bolts are installed. I am waiting on Seth to get home to help me with the torque converter bolts. It's way easier with two people. Have one person up top spinning the crank, other person puts the bolts in down below. It just saves me from having to climb out of the car and back under 1.5 million times. So we'll wait for him on those. What we can do now is get the CV axles back in, get our wheels back on, and then pretty much everything on the bottom side will be good to go, minus the skid plates. Up top, we still have to pretty much tackle everything. Wiring, coolant lines, every brace, the strut brace, everything that has to go back up on top. And then we got to top it off on diff fluid, top it off on oil, and bleed the coolant system. And that should be it. We'll be ready for a first start. But let's get to work. We'll start with the CV axles and see how much we can get done tonight. All right, that was a little bit tricky to wiggle it back in there, but essentially we had this sway bar end link taken off. Same way we got it out, we just turned the hub all the way to the right, so we opened up as much space as possible in here, slide it back, and then where I was having difficulties was actually getting it into the center diff to lock in, to get that little clip seated. So I ended up, you can see the little clamp, see that little clamp on there? That's really the only metal surface on there. I didn't want to rip the boot, so I just lightly tapped on the top of that clamp until it seated itself nicely in the diff. And then I got this bolt in, gave it a few little taps just to ensure everything was seated. And now we can go ahead and torque that down. Torque down the sway bar end link. You can see I already have the nut back there, and this side will be complete. CV axles are all torqued down. They go to 155 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. So take torque wrench, go 155, and then I just took the old breaker bar, marked where I needed to go, starting from there, going to there, and we went 90 degrees. Everything left to do is under the hood, so I'd like to get the AC compressor on and maybe the alternator on tonight before the sun goes completely down. It is coming quick, and then maybe we can get some of the wiring hooked up. Tomorrow we'll get the coolant lines hooked up, everything up top, the strut brace, the battery connections, everything hooked up, and then we should be able to get all the fluids in it, and we'll see what happens. Alrighty, it's a few days later now. I actually broke this connector on the AC compressor, so I had to order a new one, but it's all good to go now. We got the alternator in. I've just been kind of plugging along. Now we got to get the serpentine belt on. We got to get the turbo inlet on. Keep buttoning up coolant lines. As you can see, there's still quite a few undone down there. Finish up the harness and just keep plugging away. Keep plugging away at this thing. I did go ahead off camera, got the entire strut brace back on. You guys kind of saw we put all the hoses together. I did get this, I don't know if it's like a PCV or like a hard vacuum line is almost what it seems like. This is all back on. Now, I did use the harness that came from the junkyard engine and everything seems to line up, but we got one little issue. The power wire comes up through here and it has to connect to this little terminal. Problem is, it's a little short. It's a little bit different than the one on the other harness, and I didn't catch it. Otherwise, I probably would have swapped harnesses when the engine was out. But now what I think I'm gonna have to do is just get a little extension and find a way to cover this up real nice, because it is a little sketch. There's a metal strut brace right here. So we gotta attach this to an extension and then get like a little rubber grommet or cover type thing for it, and then we'll be able to run it to that terminal. Now, for whatever reason, all the wires are not loomed up over here, so I am gonna pick up some wire loom and just, individually wrap all these, organize it, and overall protect it. The one on the other harness is loomed up, so I'm not really sure why this one isn't. Before we get the front end too congested, I'm gonna go wake my roommate up, and he's gonna help me put the torque converter bolts in. Still haven't put them in, and if we get the front end all back together, we're not gonna be able to spin the crank, and it's just gonna make it a nightmare. So I'm gonna get those in real quick, and then we'll continue getting this together. And as long as I can get a power wire extension or something figured out there that's safe and gonna be reliable for the time being, we should be able to crank this thing over by the end of the day, I'm hoping. Thanks to Seth, torque converter bolts are now back in, and this thing is pretty much wrapped up top, minus the air box. I'm gonna leave this out just so I can monitor for leaks in the coolant system and oil wherever. Just wanna make sure there's no leaks before we slap everything back together. What we gotta do now is this center diff fluid. So this is some BMW, really expensive G2 hyphoid axle oil is what they call it. If you guys remember, we had to pull the center diff off this old engine and put it on this engine because it goes through the oil pan, and it's kind of hard to show you, but coming down here, you guys see that little plug right there? So that plug is your fill plug. We're essentially gonna pull that off and we're gonna fill through that hole with a little siphoning tube. And once the oil starts overflowing out of that little hole, we know that we're full. It's very important to have the car extremely level for this, or as level as you can get it. So I have it on 4 jack stands right now. And that way, when we're filling that and it starts to come up to that hole, we know we're getting an accurate reading on its fill level. If you got the front end up and the rear end back, all the oil is going to rush to the back of the center diff, and you're not going to get an accurate reading. So we're going to pop both plugs off. Always pop the fill plug off first, because if you guys pop the drain plug, which is on the bottom of the center diff, if you pull that off and then you can't get the fill plug out, you're screwed, because now you got no oil and you can't fill it. So make sure you always take the fill plug out first, which is right next to where the CV axle goes in, and then the drain plug's on the bottom. So I'm gonna drain whatever's left in there. There shouldn't really be anything, but just in case, we'll drain it out, and then I have a little pump siphon tube sort of deal, and we'll get the new oil in there. So essentially what I'm doing, I have a little pump here, got this from Harbor Freight, it's super cheap. We're gonna suck the fluid out of the bottle, and it's gonna go right into the little fill hole on the center diff. So this goes pretty quick. We're just gonna monitor the center diff. Once that starts leaking, we know that it's full. So we'll let it kind of seep all the way out. We'll put the little fill plug back on. We'll be good to go. Now it's starting to come out, so we know that that's full, as I make a mess on the driveway. All right, I know it's hard to see back there, but you can kind of see the fluid leaking out. So we know we're full there. I am replacing all the plugs. It is recommended. You can probably get away with rerunning the old ones, but I don't want this to leak. It's pretty expensive fluid, so just to be safe, we're gonna replace all the plugs. Just took a quick run to AutoZone, made something work for the power. I'm not even gonna show it because I don't recommend it. We're definitely gonna make this perfect. I'm gonna get some 2-gauge wire and probably solder it or somehow connect it, a little more safe than it is right now. But it should be enough to at least get the car running and work out any bugs. So now we just gotta put oil in the car. I'm just gonna fill the entire coolant system with distilled water, run it all the way through, make sure we have no leaks, and then I'll pull a line off, drain it out, and then we'll put the 50-50 mix in. But let's get this all filled up. We'll hook the battery up, bleed it, and start cranking. Jumping inside, believe to bleed the coolant, we go to the on position with the key. Should switch to on. Okay, I think that's the on position. So we gotta turn the fan all the way down, the heat all the way up, and then we gotta turn our lights on, and now I guess we just hold the gas pedal down for 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now our coolant system should be burping, and it is. That's pretty neat. Good old electronic water pump. So the car doesn't have to be running. It is filtering through now, so we can go ahead and add some more. You can see it's gonna be dumping some through here. It's actually feeding it through the engine. The water pump is completely on right now, so we can check for leaks, which luckily I don't see any right now. We're essentially just gonna run this all the way through, and then if there's no leaks, we can mix it with our actual BMW coolant. But there she goes. Coolant is now bled through as much as we really need to right now. What we're gonna do now, I went ahead and unplugged all of our coils, and I'm just gonna turn the motor over. We're gonna be watching for oil pressure. I'm gonna shine a light down in here, make sure our timing chain and everything in there is getting oil pressure, because if it's not, we have bigger problems. But I'm just gonna crank it for probably quite a few seconds, and hopefully we can be in luck. Make a beat out of that. Oh, she's got oil pressure. Here, you want to come just look in this hole as I'm turning it over, make sure there's oil kind of powering through there.
This one?
Yeah. You look all right?
The chain moves.
Oh, I know the chain moves. I just want to make sure there's oil in there.
It kind of looks like it. I can't really tell.
There's definitely oil in there.
Looks all greased up.
Yeah. All right. Plug coils in. All right, here goes nothing. Come on. I spent the last hour or so trying to get this thing to fire. I believe it's just not getting spark for some reason. I'm not really sure why. It's not throwing any codes, and I did disconnect a fuel line, and it's definitely got fuel in it, straight to the rail. So I don't really know what's going on. I would pull a spark plug out, but it's a special tool, and I don't have it, of course, because freaking BMWs. So I'm just going to keep diving into this until I can get it. I think I'm going to get it on the ground. We'll get the front wheels back on, take our jack stands out, and just keep working away. It's probably some weird sensor, or I'm thinking cam sensor, crank sensor, or something with the coils or the plugs. It's really our only option. The one thing that scares me is, like I said, I did use the harness that came with this engine. So if wiring might be a little bit different, reading from the ECU, I don't really know. I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping it's just something we're missing, but I guess we'll find out. Silent. I spent a little bit longer working on this thing. I was actually almost about to give up, but something clicked in my head, and I'm thinking, you know, it is a BMW, and this freaking technology stuff is throughout all the cars. I figured, let me switch the ECM, or it's called something different on these things. It's like D something. I can't remember. But anyways, I took the ECM off the old engine and put it on this one, because they're probably coded with like the VIN or something. Something wasn't lining up. As soon as I got them swapped out, car fired right up. So we're good to go there. Did blow a lot of white smoke at first till it started to clear out. I hooked the MAF back up. We got no engine light. Car's running smooth. There is like a little rattle in the bay, but I believe it's coming from that fuel pressure regulator type thing. I've watched videos, and all BMWs like this make that sound. So engine alone sounds fine, sounds super healthy. I did do a couple revs on it already, a little 2,000 RPM revs to make sure it sounds good. And I think we're good. So I'm gonna get the wheels back on, get the car on the ground after I get the skid plates on. We got no leaks, so maybe we'll be driving this thing tomorrow. Alrighty, it's the next day now. I got this thing back on the ground finally. Let's give this thing a start up. Nice and smooth. No codes, no smoke either, nice and quiet. There is still that little rattle from the bay, but I believe, like I said, that's just that regulator. She's a little noisy, but it is relatively quiet up here. I think once you have the hood down and the little cover on the engine, you don't even hear it from the outside. I'm just gonna make sure our tires are aired up to correct pressure, and then we'll move the truck, go take this thing for a little ride. Yesterday, the only thing I was noticing was it wasn't like going up in temp. The gauge was stuck all the way down on coolant temp. So another reason why put distilled water in if anything's up with that. We can drain all the coolant. I'll replace the thermostat and the coolant temp sensor, and hopefully that'll fix our problem. But maybe once we go and drive it, it'll start to go up. I just don't want it to not be able to trigger the thermostat and end up overheating it because the gauge isn't reading right or the sensor's not reading properly and telling the ECM. So we got to fix that. But other than that, the car sounds great. All right, so as I'm sitting in here, I found out there's a little hidden menu down here, and you just have to add up the last 5 digits of the VIN to unlock it. There's a bunch of YouTube videos on it. I just looked one of them up. And we're able to monitor all sorts of temps down here. So you see I have oil temp. I can also monitor coolant temp. There's actually a lot of gauges that I can monitor. So shout out to BMW for that. That's actually really cool. And not a lot of vehicles have that. But now you can see the gauge is starting to go up now that it is up to temp. So we just weren't letting the oil get warm enough. That's actually oil temp and not coolant temp. So I was a little bit mistaken. So we should be good. We're gonna go take it for a little test drive and see how it does. Being that it sat up in upstate New York for over a year, the brakes are incredibly rusty. I'm not sure if you guys can see in there, but hopefully we can wear them down a little bit. If not, I might just go get the rotors turned and we can slap some pads on it, help my dad out a little bit. But hopefully these things will just brush off. I'm pretty confident in it. Done it quite a few times. Alrighty, so the car seems to be running pretty good. What I want to do now is just kind of break in the brakes. They're really non-existent right now, so I'm kind of trying to watch my speed. They're getting a lot better. I did go for a little, wow, it's sunny. Should have brought my sunglasses. But I went for a little test drive just on and off the brakes, and it definitely smoothed them out quite a bit. But when you come to a stop, they don't like to grab too well, so just trying to clean them up a little bit more, and I think we'll be able to get it. I'm hoping. If not, like I said, we'll have to pick up some new brakes. It's probably the safe way, but I'm sure we can clean these up pretty nice. Yep, there's the brakes for you. The rotors might be a little warped, I'm not really sure, but it's pretty rough. All right, cool. I'm monitoring coolant temp, and it looks like thermostat just opened up. Coolant temp went back down. So that's a good sign. It means our thermostat's working. Cool. I'm happy. Made it out to our little parking spot out here. Car looks good, sounds good. Really no issues all around besides our little brake thing, but we'll get that sorted. But cool to see this thing finally out driving again. Last time I saw this driving was well over 2 years ago, so I'm sure my dad will be stoked as well to finally have this car back. Last thing I have to do is just drain the coolant system again and get our actual coolant in there, and then this car will be put in the trailer and back to New York it goes. Made it back home with a running car, so I'm gonna wrap this video up right here. I'll catch you in the next one, but until then, peace out. See y'all later.